Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar today that's organized by the Product School. My name is Krishna. Today we'll be discussing about the differences between enterprise tech and consumer tech product management. Just to give a brief about myself, my name is Krishna. I currently work at Microsoft as a senior PM. Previously, I have had stints with enterprise tech companies like Cisco, Arista, and Juniper, and I've also worked on consumer tech products. So I have experience on both enterprise tech as well as consumer tech products. I have a master's degree in software management from Carnegie Mellon University. So here is the agenda for today's webinar. We'll first quickly discuss what is enterprise tech and consumer tech, right? So we'll define what is enterprise tech and what is consumer tech. And then we will discuss about the differences between enterprise tech and consumer tech product management in terms of design, engineering, and business. And then we will talk about how day-to-day life of an enterprise tech PM would look like. And finally, we'll also discuss about how day-to-day life of a consumer tech PM would look like. Right, so let's get into the presentation. So first, let's define what is enterprise tech, right? So what kind of products actually fall under the category of enterprise tech? Right, so typically enterprise tech has all these products that are sold to other businesses or other companies, right? So you can kind of think of it as a B2B business model, right? So so some of the examples include Amazon Web Services, or products from Cisco, or products from Salesforce, or VMware, right? So if you see, there are two kinds of products in enterprise tech primarily. One is we call them as systems products, like an operating system, for example, or an infrastructure software, right? And then the other piece of enterprise tech would be a SaaS company like Salesforce, right? For example, VMware builds virtualization software, so that is kind of a systems software, right? That's one spectrum of enterprise tech. The other spectrum of enterprise tech is SaaS software, which is nothing but which is what companies like Salesforce build, right? So remember, so enterprise tech primarily encompasses two types of products. One is systems products, like an operating system product, right? And then the other thing is, a SaaS product, like what Salesforce builds, right? Now, who are the main users of enterprise tech products? Right? So typically, you sell enterprise tech products to other companies or other businesses, right? So various teams in those companies, like IT team, DevOps, developers, sales, marketing, they are your main users. So they form your user persona. For example, for Salesforce SaaS software, the sales team, or a salesperson is the user persona, because Salesforce software is used by sales team for managing lead generation, for example, right? When you look at products from Cisco, where they sell switches and routers, right? So IT team is the main user of those products, right? If you look at Amazon Web Services, which is a cloud computing product, DevOps and developers would be the main users of Amazon Web Services. And so these are so typically the employees or the teams within a company or a business, they would be the main users of your enterprise tech products. Right now, let's define what is consumer tech. Consumer tech, as you know, typically it's a product that's distributed directly to consumers via mobile apps or web apps, right? So main users of your product are the end consumers, right? So various apps like Airbnb, Uber, Amazon e-commerce, Google Maps, YouTube, Facebook, all these actually come under the definition of consumer tech products. Now, before we look at the differences between consumer tech and enterprise tech, let's quickly, understand what exactly is product management. So we have understood, what are the products that fall under enterprise tech and consumer tech, right? Now let's discuss about what exactly is product management. So I would like to take an example of movie here, right? So for example, take the movie Titanic. James Cameron is the director, right? So what did James Cameron do for Titanic? So we say James Cameron directed the movie, right? So what exactly does it mean when we say James Cameron directed the movie? Right? So did James Cameron provide music for Titanic? No. Did James Cameron act in the movie? No. There was Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet and other actors, right? Did James Cameron edit the movie? No. There was an editor who edited Titanic. Did James Cameron provide costumes for Titanic? No. Did James Cameron? I've just mentioned four crafts of movie here, like actors, editing, costumes, and music director, but there are other crafts also, right? Cinematography and stunts, action. There are various things, right? So James Cameron probably did not do any of those things, but we still say James Cameron directed the movie. Then what exactly did James Cameron do? So James Cameron had the vision of telling the story of Titanic on the big screen, right? So he had that vision. Then he worked with all the 24 crafts of a movie. So there are typically 24 crafts, while making a movie. Right? So he worked with all the 24 crafts to execute his vision, right? So remember, right, this, right? So James Cameron had a vision, and James Cameron worked with all the 24, with the technicians belonging to all the 24 crafts to execute his vision. Now, James Cameron did not necessarily probably did not do any of those 24 crafts. Maybe he had some knowledge about each of those crafts, but he did not do them. He worked with the specific technicians to execute his vision, right? Now, with that in mind, let's look at the product management in a tech company. What does product management mean in a tech company, right? So, product management in a tech company typically encompasses disciplines like design, engineering, business, right? Here, engineering includes your software engineering, the actual engineers building the code, and your data scientists and everything, right? And then business here includes sales, marketing, and all those things, right? So typically, product management encompasses these three areas: design, engineering, and business. Right. So now, before we move further, right? So as I had mentioned earlier, just like how a movie director has a vision of telling a story, right? Similarly, product manager needs to have a vision for his or her product, right? Now, so the product manager has a vision for the product, and then the product manager needs to have a strategy, to execute that vision. Typically, the deliverable for a product manager is a PRD, something called as a PRD or MRD, product requirements document, right? So the product manager puts his vision and strategy into a PRD, products requirement document, which is then taken by design team, engineering team, to build the product, right? So remember, you need to have a vision, then you obviously need to have a strategy for the vision. So your vision and strategy need to be put into your PRD. That's the main deliverable, that product manager gives to engineering or design, right? Of course, the main deliverable of the product manager is product itself, right? So that's there. But when it comes to working with design and engineering, the deliverable for the product manager is to actually give a PRD, a product requirements document, which has the vision and strategy for the product, right? Now, once you have the PRD, the product requirements document, which explains, what is the feature and, what should the feature do? Who are the main user personas using that feature, right? And then what are the success metrics? How do the success metrics look like for that feature, right? So all these details need to go into your PRD, right? So once that is ready, the first step is to actually work with the design team to come with the user interface, right? Now, if you see, I have shown three types of user interfaces here, right? So I hope you can see my cursor movement. So you see, this is actually a screenshot of Amazon e-commerce mobile app, right? So this is a consumer tech mobile app. Now, how do you build design for the consumer tech app, right? So typically you start with wireframes. You probably have tools like Balsamiq and those things, where you build Balsamiq or Sketch, where you build wireframes and mockups, right? And then you work with your design team to polish the design, right? And then you take your design to the end consumers of your product. So when you're writing the PRD, you would have mentioned about user personas, like who are the main users for this product, right? So for example, assume that for the Amazon e-commerce product that you see here, maybe a user between the age of 18 to 50, right? So that's your primary target user, right? So that's a user persona, right? So you will probably invite a few users, or you will go to a user and talk to the user and get feedback on the design that you have come up with, right? So see, if you're a big company like Amazon or LinkedIn, for example, a big consumer tech company, you will have various ways of getting feedback from users. There is a separate UX team that solicits feedback from the users on your design and all, right? For example, if you're a startup, if you are working in a consumer tech startup, you won't have so many resources, right? So you just zero in on your user persona and probably invite those folks to, let's say, to Starbucks, have a coffee, right? And then ask them for feedback on your design, right? So I'm just giving an example if you're a startup, because you don't have many avenues to get consumers to give feedback on your mock-ups, right? If you're a big company, like I said, there are separate teams who actually get those feedback through user-focused studies and various methods, right? But anyway, so the point I'm trying to make is the aim is to actually go to your user persona, like work with like 3 or 4 of your user personas, get the feedback for your mockups, go back to the design team, make the necessary changes. You go through this design iteration and get your design out, right? Now that's for consumer tech companies. Now, if you are building a SaaS product, like this that you see here, where I'm moving my cursor, this is how a Salesforce user interface would look like, Salesforce software user interface, right? Now, like I said, SaaS is, it falls under enterprise tech, right? Because you're selling the software to other businesses, which means you're charging money for it, right? So you are solving a business problem, right? So for example, Salesforce, let's say it solves the problem of managing lead generation for the sales team, right? So how do you build the user interface for this, right? So obviously, once you have your PRD ready, in your PRD, you would have mentioned, okay, this is the business function that we need to solve. Right, so there's a workflow to solve that business function, right? And then you say your main user persona for this is the sales team, right? So you would approach, some companies, which you target, and then work with the sales team in those companies, right? And then get feedback for your mock-ups, right? Again, go back to your design team, make any necessary changes, and go through that iteration process, right? So that process of, first working on your wireframes and mock-ups with your design team, and then taking to your user persona, and then getting the feedback, incorporating the feedback, and iterating the design, that remains same between, consumer tech and SaaS product. It's just that how you solicit feedback varies between, consumer tech product and SaaS products. But otherwise, the process of iterating the design, wherein you go to the user persona and get feedback, all that remains the same. And then you see, I've put something here. If some of your engineers here, you would realize that this is actually a command line interface, or a shell, right? A Unix shell or Windows shell, right? So see, this kind of user interface is mainly, used for systems products, like operating systems, basically, right? So the example that you see here is actually for Windows. So it's Windows operating system PowerShell for Amazon Web Services, right? So this is an user interface that's more technical. So typically these kind of systems products are more targeted towards, developers and engineers, right? So there isn't too much of UI elements involved here, as you can see when you're designing, this interface for an operating system. But still, there has to be some kind of a UI, right, to interact. So that's how, this UI would look like. So like I said, this is not as sophisticated as what you would do for a consumer tech UI or a SaaS UI, right? So now we have looked at design. Now let's look at the differences between enterprise tech product management and consumer tech product management in terms of engineering, right? So you have your vision strategy. You have put your vision and strategy into a PRD, right? And from the PRD, you have worked with your design team to finalize how the design should look like. And then the next step is to hand over the design to your software engineering team so that they can write the code for it, right? Now, so if you go back, a few slides ago, I had mentioned that enterprise tech encompasses two main categories, right? One is systems products, the other one is SaaS products, right? So if you look at a systems product, typically the software is released once every 3 to 6 months. I mean, this is not a hard and fast rule, but typical software release for a systems product would happen once every 3 to 6 months, right? Like I said, systems products includes products like operating system products and other software like virtualization software, for example, from VMware. So these all fall under systems products, right? Typical software release is once every 3 to 6 months because these are complex products, right? So your engineering team will obviously need more time to build these products. And remember, these are also very business critical for your customers, right? So that's why it takes more time to build a systems product, right? Now, when you look at a SaaS product, a typical software release for a SaaS product would be somewhere between 1 to 3 months. Again, not a hard and fast rule, but that's typical, right? So SaaS products typically are delivered over web apps and mobile apps, like what Salesforce does, right? So typical software release timeline is 1 to 3 months. Now, when you look at consumer tech, so these are mobile apps and web apps, right? So typical software release for a consumer tech product is 2 to 4 weeks, right? So consumer tech engineering teams follow more agile model, right? So typically the sprint, normally it's 2 weeks, the length of the sprint, right? Sometimes it can also go up to 4 weeks, right? Now, so these are all, how the software, I mean, this is, so I've just explained you about, the software release cycles, right? Now, taking a step back, but what exactly happens, when you as a product manager are working with, these engineering teams, right? For example, in a systems a product environment, when you are working with, let's say, you are a PM at VMware and you are working with the engineering team in VMware, right? So you would be, you obviously have your PRD, and you will be working with engineering team to build the product, and it's a complex product, like I said, right? So you typically will have probably, 2 or 3 meetings in a week with your engineering team, right? So where you talk to the engineering team and they tell you how this work is going on, what is the status, are there any road blockers, because believe me, systems products are very complex to build, so there will always be roadblocks that are going to be there, right? So you as a product manager need to work with engineering, to remove those roadblocks, right? So you need to collaborate maybe with the other teams within the company, right? Sometimes you might even have to take a decision that, okay, you have reached a stage where, this is way too complex to build within 3 to 6 months. So we probably need to stop this, or, we need more time. So all these decisions need to be taken, and you need to be thinking quick on your feet to make these decisions. But that's how you work with engineering team in a systems environment, right? So similarly, in a SaaS product environment, you again probably have these 2 to 3 meetings in a week with your engineering team and work with them, and release the product, right? So again, irrespective of whether you're working on a systems product or SaaS product in an enterprise tech environment, as I said, there are always going to be cases where there are going to be roadblocks for your product. You need to work with your engineering to remove those roadblocks. All right, or if you need to take a tough decision that, you need to extend the timeline, you have to do that, right? So that's all your job as a product manager, and you need to communicate these new timelines, probably the new extended timelines to your sales team and customers, which is not easy, because you tell them, hey, I'm going to give you something in 6 months, and then you go and tell them, hey, this is going to take 1 year now, right? So all this stakeholder management is something that you need to do, right? Now, when it comes to consumer tech, because it's an agile model, you actually meet your engineering team every day in a sprint, right? Like I said, sprint is typically 2 weeks. So every day there's something called as a stand-up meeting, right? Where there's a scrum master, and the engineering manager, the engineers are all present, and you get an update from the engineering team. And again, same thing, you need to think quick, you need to be thinking quick on your feet. And if you feel something is blocking the product, or if you feel you need to change the priority slightly, all these things need to happen, because believe me, I know you will freeze the requirements before going to the engineering, but the requirements are always going to change, right? So it's your job as a product manager on how you deal with those various situations, and do the stakeholder management, right? So that's typically how you would be working in engineering teams, in various engineering teams across systems products, SaaS products, and consumer tech, right? Now, let's look at the differences between enterprise tech and consumer tech product management in terms of business, right? So if you look at enterprise tech products, like I said, there are two main classes of products. One is your systems products, like operating systems and virtualization software, and things like that. And then there is your SaaS products, right? Typically, there are two business models for any enterprise tech product. One is capex model, which is capital expenditure, wherein the customer pays all the money upfront, right? So the customer pays X amount of dollars upfront, and then gets that software license for lifetime, right? So that's capital expenditure. Now, there's another kind of model which is called as OPEX model, or operational expenditure, which is typically your subscription model, which is what happens in your SaaS products, right? So wherein the customer would pay X dollars per user per month, or per year also, depending on how you have planned your business model. But yeah, typically it'll be X dollars per user per month, right? So these are two main business models for enterprise tech products. So if you are a product manager, let's say for enterprise tech product, you obviously need to decide whether you would be having a capex model for your product or an opex model. If it's a capex model, then you need to work with your finance team, right, to come up with the right pricing. Similarly, if it's an opex model, you need to work with your finance team to come up with that figure of X dollars per user per month. So what is that X? You will work with your finance team to come up with that figure, right? So that's how you would work on a business model for enterprise tech product. When we look at consumer tech business models, obviously there are various business models for consumer tech. Now consumer tech companies can get really really creative when it comes to new business models, right? So for example, companies like Google and Facebook, as you know, they have business model through ads. Right now ads typically, it happens through bidding, right? So various people bid for an ad, and most of the cases whoever is the highest bidder would win, right? I know there are few corner cases where not necessarily the highest bidder would win, right? The algorithm probably might say the more relevant, bidder would win, but by and large, typically the highest bidder would win, right? If it's ads business model. The other business model for consumer tech products could be a subscription model, like what Netflix does, where you pay a monthly charge to use Netflix, right? For example. The other business model is, per transaction charges, like what Uber does, right? So when you book a Uber, Uber takes a cut, for per transaction, right? So that's another business model. I mean, I've mentioned these three because these three are, widely used by various consumer tech products, but there are a lot more, business models where, people get creative when designing the business model for consumer tech products, right? So yeah, this is how, the business models would look like, and these are the differences between an enterprise tech business model and a consumer tech business model, right? Now, so with all this context in mind, let's quickly look at how does day-to-day life are like, you can maybe ask me, so Krishna, okay, if, you have given all this context, now what exactly what exactly happens in the day-to-day life of an enterprise tech product manager, right? So as I said, the product manager, needs to work with all the stakeholders, right, to execute his or her vision for the product. So if you're an enterprise tech PM, on any given day, you would be interacting with your engineering team, with your design team, with your sales and marketing team, and with your customer support team, right? Working with all these teams to execute your vision. Of course, I have not mentioned customer here because you obviously would be working with your end customers, right? So that's a given, right? Because that's implicit, right? So that's why I've not mentioned it explicitly. So you will be working with customers, obviously, right? So you will be working with all these teams on any given day to execute your vision, right? Now remember, I had mentioned that one of the main deliverables that product manager needs to give design and engineering is your PRD, the product requirements document. So you can ask me, Krishna, hey, how do I, get to know of requirements, right? Or how do I know what are the features that are needed in my product, right? So because those are the things that go into your PRD, right? So see, there are various avenues to, get requirements for your product. One is obviously, from your previous experience, like for example, you probably have joined Salesforce from another SaaS company, which means you already have SaaS experience, right? So requirements come from your, experience. You might say, hey, Salesforce needs to do this thing now, right? So that you put in your PRD, right? You work with sales team will say, hey, my customer wants this product or this feature, right? So that's another avenue for getting requirements, which will go into your PRD, right? The other, obviously, when you talk to the customers directly, customers will, explain their pain points to you, right? So that's another, so talking to customers directly is an obvious avenue to get the requirements, right? One other interesting avenue for you to get your requirements is support team, right? If you look at support data, you will start probably noticing trends where, customers are opening tickets, support tickets for the same issue again and again. Maybe, you can solve that problem through a feature, right? So that becomes another requirement, right? So these are various avenues through which you can get your requirements, right? So as a PM in an enterprise tech company, yeah, so you would be working with all these various teams on any given day to execute your vision for the product, right? Now, how does the day-to-day life look like for a consumer tech PM, right? Now, you see the difference between, the stakeholders here. If you see, there's a slight difference in the stakeholders, that you interact with if you're a consumer tech PM, right? So if you're a PM, obviously you will still, if you're a consumer tech PM, obviously you will still be interacting with design and engineering teams, but you will also be interacting with a team, something called as growth marketing, right? So which is the team that's responsible to make your app go viral, to get more user signups, right? You will also be working with data scientists, obviously, right? So if you see, I have not mentioned data scientists explicitly for enterprise tech PM. That doesn't mean that enterprise tech PMs don't look at data, don't work with data. Enterprise tech PMs also work, with data. They look at the data and then decide, or like, what should be the next step. But I've mentioned data scientists explicitly for consumer tech PM here because the kind of data that you're dealing with for a consumer tech product, especially if it's a successful consumer tech product, right? It's humongous, right? You will typically be dealing with the user behavior for tens of millions of users and hundreds of millions of users. And if you're Facebook or Instagram, you're talking about billion users, right? So, so that's why I mentioned data scientists explicitly here. So these are the various stakeholders that a consumer tech PM would be interacting with in his or her day-to-day job, right? So that's how a typical day-to-day would look like for a consumer tech PM. So that's the presentation I had, and if you want to reach out to me, please feel free to reach out to me in LinkedIn or email me. If you have any questions on enterprise tech product management, consumer tech product management, or product management in general, right? So please feel free to either email me or connect me in LinkedIn, right? And yeah, so thank you everyone for taking time. Please stay safe, take care. And thanks to Product School for arranging this webinar, and take care. Bye.